Well, that was a doozy of a gospel reading, hey? Mercy. For several years now, I have approached gospel stories or parables like this with a starting point of fear. I'm not a cradle Anglican. I grew up in a very conservative, fundamentalist, evangelical church. A church that often used fear as a push for a response, whether it be conversion or changing of behaviors. And this really worked against me. So as I approached gospel stories like this, where God appears to be a wrathful jerk, to be honest, I approached it with this paralyzing fear. Like God was holding this magnifying glass up against all my failures and my mistakes and my flaws, and I was sure that I was going to be one of the ones on the outside, that approaches a banquet feast of God, and God says, no, you're not one of my chosen ones. Off to the gnashing of teeth and the wailing, But I was going to be kicked out of the gospel banquet, the kingdom banquet, that I was not going to make the cut. And it really was not until fairly recently that this fear began to release. There's still a little twinge of it from time to time. When our upbringings speak a harmful message over us, those loud voices become kind of slow, nagging, quiet, are you sure comments. But for the most part, I've learned to approach gospels like this in a little bit of a different light. And it began about 5 or 6 years ago. I had this absolutely wonderful Roman Catholic Jungian therapist. And we spent the first 3 or 4 weeks together just talking through things so that he got an idea of what was important to me and what I struggled with and what was kind of going on internally within me. And then we began each session, after he realized this, we began each session by reading through a gospel text, meditatively and slowly. And this is the key, entirely introspectively. Like each and every one of the characters in a gospel story represents a part of who we are, that mirrors back to us parts of ourselves. And from that space, we have this integration. Because to be human is to have failures and to have faults and to make mistakes and learn and to have blessings and to have gifts that we offer one another. And so by entering into a gospel story introspectively, having these characters mirror back to us parts of ourselves can be intensely healing. And if we do that with this gospel text, we first say hello to a king who is holding a wedding banquet for his son, and none of the guests arrive. I think of the feeling that would be attached to that if I was that king. The vulnerability of putting together all these elements of a party. The fine linens, the great wine, the food. All the things that we need to make his son's wedding special. And no one shows up. When we say hello to that king, we say hello to vulnerability. The vulnerability of trying to host someone into a space that we picture as blessing and having them not respond. We say hello to the feeling of rejection or isolation. And then if we move on to those who received an invitation but didn't respond and didn't show up. We say hello to the reasons that we make for ourselves for not entering into the kingdom of God at all. And I think we all make these decisions sometimes. And they can be based out of good things, but sometimes they can get in the way of us really entering into the kingdom of God fully and completely. In this I see and I say hello to the parts of myself the busyness and the weariness, the stress or the anxiety that keep me out of God's kingdom sometimes. That when I feel like God's pulling me to something and I just can't go there quite yet. Or if we say hello to the members of the community that actually do show up, the good and the bad, Jesus says. We picture and we say hello to that sense of community and inclusion, where everyone has a place to belong at that table. Everyone has a beautiful wedding garment to wear. And they're all there together. And in that space, we say hello to the parts of us that know that we belong, the parts of us who have a place at God's table, who are and know that we are beloved children of God. And finally, if we say hello to the man who doesn't have the wedding garment, the man who's there with everyone but not really there fully. And I'm reminded of those times when I show up to something and, like I just said, I'm there but I'm not. Not fully present and aware of those around me, of the blessings that they bring to me and the blessings I bring to them. You know, those times that I'm there but I'm not. I learned something new this week as I was kind of unpacking this gospel and as I did a little bit of research. And that was that I always heard this story as the king being a jerk to this guy. You know, this guy being there and trying to be a part of things, but not having what he needs to be fully engaged. And God coming along as this kind of wrathful, judgmental being. But there's a commentary that suggested that the practice of the time was that if the king was going to hold the banquet, that the king would send his servants out to give the wedding robe to each person that comes into the banquet. And so this man, for whatever reason he had, didn't receive that wedding garment and didn't put it on. I remember someone saying to me once that the only people that we ever see Jesus exclude are those who exclude others. And I thought, well, I think that's true. I haven't had a chance to do extensive research on it yet, but I think that's true. And in this sense, the man is excluding himself and excluding others from this kind of beautiful image that is supposed to be this banquet where all are welcomed and all are fed, and all have a place to belong, and all have a home at that table. And so, as I think about that, I say hello to that part of me that as God holds out a holy garment to me. The parts of me that are reluctant sometimes to take it and to put it on. I think each of us has a holy garment being held out to us today. And we're being asked to put it on and to join the kingdom of God, to join that banquet. And so today, we look at what the parts of ourselves are that are reluctant to put on those garments fully and to just step right into the banquet and kingdom of God. I can share one of those ways that I feel that today. And so I've actually never been a priest in charge before. I've always kind of been an associate or understudy. And I'm almost vibrating with excitement and fear. Because this call that God has on me and this call that I hear from you is calling me into a territory that I've not been before. And so, as I unpacked this gospel this week, I began to put that garment on more fully and with courage, actually. And so today, as we look at the garment that God is holding out to us. The garment of God's grace and inclusion, of God's peace and compassion. Let us name for ourselves the things that we feel reluctant about. And let us, with courage, put on those garments together. Another thing that I noticed about this story was that God's servants were handing out these garments to people at the doors. And so this all leads to us extending the garments of God to those around us and inviting all into this space with us. It's not just something that we sit in our warmth and comfort of God's robe, but it's something that we pass out to one another as well. So may that be so in this community. May that be so in our hearts. May we take on those garments with courage. Amen.